What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back to America Trends. Larry Rifkin and John Krofzik making our way in this vast internet world.
You know,
John.
You better take it. I don't really feel like doing this right now.
Oh, you get on the floor and give me 10 push-ups. That's the way I feel about what we're about to explore. Now, we try to exercise your brain on this podcast, but this episode requires some physical exertion too, John.
Oh, no, not physical.
Yeah. Work. Remember Dobie Gillis?
Yeah.
Work. Well, Dobie Gillis, some people out there going, what? Yeah, that is ancient history, TV history.
Google
I'm sure
that.
you can find him on YouTube.
Yeah.
But he was a great character.
He was.
Great character.
Very funny.
Bob Denver, right? And then he gave us another classic.
Yeah, there you go.
Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
He had two classic characters. Well, we're two classic characters, and we have discovered through our laborious research arm here at America Trends that we have a laziness epidemic that is threatening the longevity of many who are listening to us right now.
Wow, that's scary.
Many in their middle age. Now,
Yeah.
some people thought, well, we begin to slow down in our 60s or 70s. There are a lot of people who never speed up. I mean, they sped up when they were in high school, and they haven't really lifted a weight or run a mile since.
Right.
They've been lifting kegs, but that's about it. So, health bosses, as they are called in the United Kingdom, say that 45% of us over 16 are so lazy, John, so lazy, they say sedentary.
How lazy are they?
Well, that we do not manage even to get a health-boosting 10-minute walk in a day.
Wow.
Now, do you have one of those step counters? Do you have?
You know, I had one. I got to start wearing it again. We had a little competition.
But you're too
in the
lazy
house.
to tie it on
But
every
I
day?
was just too lazy to put it on.
No, but do you ascribe to that whole notion of 10,000 steps a day?
Well, I subscribe to the notion that, you know, the more you move, the better it is for you. I don't know if you necessarily have to do 10,000 steps, but as long as you're getting your heart rate up at some point, you're good.
Well, you know, when you think about it, a 10-minute walk a day, John, to me, seems like a pretty low bar.
It is.
I mean, just walking around the office, you know, chasing. No, you can't do that anymore. I mean, no, seriously, that seems like a low bar. And look, you don't have to have a sticker on your car proclaiming 13.1 or 26.2. I mean, now, but the ones I really don't like are the ones that really take joy in saying 0.0.
Yeah, no, that's not good.
No, I mean, come on. You're telling the world, I don't do anything, and I'm proud of it.
You're proud of it.
No, really. I mean, that's ridiculous.
I think the 26.1, though, I think that some of those people look like...
Yeah, well,
I think, you know, that you got to be somewhere in the middle there.
No, that's a great point. You know, my daughter did a couple of marathons. I'm one of these guys who gets on the treadmill virtually every day for 4 miles, but I don't do races. I like to do my own thing. I lift weights because I was really told years ago by a great guy, Mark Fenton, who was a speed walker in the Olympics, and we did a series with him for public television called America's Walking. And he really impressed upon me the notion that anything you do with your upper body, you've got to do that because we do atrophy in terms of our bone mass. And it's really important, not only the aerobic, but also a little bit of upper body. So I lift weights, but he said you don't have to do a lot. Even if you take a gallon of milk and you put a gallon in one arm or on 2 arms and you take 2, I mean, that's enough.
Right, right.
You don't really have to do that much, but you have to do something. So we are so desperate to show that we care about this that we have brought over from the UK, from the University of Glasgow in Scotland, a gentleman by the name of Naveed Sattar. And he really helps us to understand how really significant this particular deficit in exercise and movement is, John.
Oh, you really, you got to move. You got to keep moving, because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
And I'll tell you, you do get to know people who really like exercise. I remember when I used to go to conferences, and people would be out all night drinking and all. And there were a number of us who really were into that early morning. And don't forget, a lot of these things at conferences start at 8 o'clock or 8:30. And it was religion to me. I had to get back so I could get enough rest to be out there at 6 in the morning. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like that subculture of people who feel that this is important in their lives. And you go by each other and you wave or you give a little high sign. You don't know what music they're listening to. You don't care. You don't bother each other. You all look terrible. You're sweating, but you feel great. You really do.
And being up early in the morning is kind of nice. Seeing the sunrise sometimes and stuff. I enjoy that.
Oh, it's beautiful out there early in the morning, or a nice early evening jog. Well, you don't have to be a gym rat, though my wife is going and she's getting great results. She goes 3 days a week, but you can do whatever you want to do. But I'll tell you, I was wondering once, and I asked this Mark Fenton, John, I said, what is speed walking? And he gave the greatest analogy. He said, when kids are by a pool and they start running on the side of the pool and somebody says to them, hold on. And so then they start just walking fast, That's exactly what speed walking is. So you can picture that, the kids, and then they slow it down. Well, look, it's really important that we make our cities more walkable. There are a lot of public policy issues that are tied up in trying to fight this laziness epidemic. And you see it. You see where a lot of these urbanites walking everywhere, biking on those city bikes, whatever it may be. But even if you live in a rural enclave or whatever it may be, a suburban tract, you got to find your own way to exercise, because seriously, this is a big problem, this laziness epidemic. And this professor who we're going to have on, believe it or not, John, he's got a degree in metabolic medicine.
Metabolic medicine.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I want you to take 2 quarts of that a day. Well, some might call it a gut course, John.
Gut course.
Oh, but that's not what it is. Literally and figuratively, he's going to walk us through all this. So now let's go to Naveed Sattar.
Let's do that.
Dr. Naveed Sattar is with us, and you have been quoted in a number of articles talking about what is deemed a laziness epidemic. What is that?
Okay, a laziness epidemic is essentially a reductions in physical activity over the last 10 to 20 years, so that less people are as active as they used to be 10 to 25 years ago, and more people are sedentary, so that the overall levels of activity in society have come down, and the levels of sedentary activity or sedentary behavior, shall I say, have gone up, sufficient to cause, we think, ill health, and sufficient in a sufficient number of the population to be called an epidemic. And I think that's what we're facing, and it's a serious problem. And it's paralleled by rising obesity levels, so we really have to tackle this in a serious way.
And urban life seems to involve a lot more of just repetitive activity that's not even exercise, but just to get places. Is that something you're seeing in the UK too?
I do think we have looked at those statistics as well. Most of our people, the vast majority of our population lives in urban society. So I think that's less of an issue in the UK. USA is so much more spread out. So distances travelled by car, for example, tend to be much greater in the US than in the UK. I think the issue we have within the UK, there's some funny, strange things going on. Number one, because people are more obese, it's not simply they're more obese because of less activity. They're more, the predominant reason for obesity in our society is actually overconsumption of calories. But once people become more obese in parts, so it is driven predominantly by overconsumption of calories, they also find it harder to be physically active. So the motivation, the strength, the willingness, the enthusiasm to be active is less, because it's harder to be active when you become more obese as well. So that's a kind of strange paradox. But equally, as we all know, that the ability just to stay inside, engulf yourself in media, whether it's television, social media, computing, means that it's much more attractive now, or to be entertained within your own house than ever was the case. That people perhaps don't actually do the simple things in life, like just simply going out for a walk or meeting their friends or doing the normal daily activities. So, and I think that's become a big problem as well.
I was reading in one article that you're quoted in that the health bosses in the UK, and you have a lot more management of health situations over there with your national service, say that 45% of over 16s are so sedentary that they don't manage the health-boosting 10-minute walk. Is part of this that we get a lot of mixed messages about how much physical activity is necessary in order to be healthy? Some people will say, well, it's only an hour and a half a week, or others 10 minutes a day, or whatever. Do we really get the signals correct in terms of what is required to stay active, or at least to keep the cardiovascular system moving?
I think you're partly correct. The message is, to some people, if you make the bar, apparently too high, 150 minutes sounds quite a lot. But the reality is that's only 30 minutes a day, which can be accumulated in lots of small bouts. But I think the reality is, because we are not as active as we used to be, the health bosses within the UK have effectively said, look, for those who are completely sedentary, even aim for 10 minutes per day. Even that, if you walk 10 minutes per day for brisk walking, will gain you health benefits. And if I was to say to people listening, I think the best way to try and gain physical activity is to have to do it in your commute to work, or any opportunity from within your place of work to engage in activity. So, for example, if you during your lunch break, instead of just staying in your office, go and take a walk and buy lunch somewhere else. And equally, if you work up several flights of, several floors up, don't take the elevator. Push yourself to take the stairs even once or twice a day, so that actually just by doing simple things, getting back and forth to work or engaging in activity during your work, can actually accumulate plenty of time of physical activity. And those small pieces of activity add up and can make a difference. So in fact, I do that during my daily routine. I feel lousy if I don't actually either walk or cycle to work every day, and cycle back. And I feel lousy if I don't actually walk and get my lunch somewhere. So I'm trying to accumulate most of my daily activity during my normal daily routines to in and around work. And I think that's really important. For other people, I think they just have to, another good way is to look at the step counts they have on their phones and just try and aim for something. You can measure it for a couple of weeks, and if they're only, for example, averaging 4,000, that's clearly too low, then they should try and aim for 6,000, an extra 2,000. And once they get used to that, it becomes kind of addictive to try and aim for that level, every day. You won't manage it every day, but it becomes a good barometer of your daily activities. And again, I use my phone, and I know, for example, during summer, I'm averaging about 10,000 steps. But during the winter, so it's winter months just now, it's usually I'm averaging somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000. But if I don't manage, if I for 5 days go at 3,000 steps, I know for the next 4 or 5 days I have to push a little bit more, and I'll take an extra couple of walks just to see that number going up. So those are the kind of little tricks I think people can play, but particularly engaging in commuting to work, that can make a big difference. And it can become enjoyable as well. I think that's the other really important point.
Oh, absolutely. So you're talking about making the technology work for us, but I think there are a lot of concerns that the technology, making everything so easy for us, everything at our fingertips, everything related to our smartphone, that is really one of the nemesis that we have to deal with in terms of getting people more active. So is technology a friend or a foe in this fight against obesity?
Yeah, no, I think you make a fantastic point. I'm increasingly worried about the internet and technology. I think all of us who are parents worry about our children's excessive use of technology, whether it happens to be Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, whatever, constantly communicating with their friends rather than going to see their friends as they used to, just walking a few blocks to see your friends. You're just spending more time actually just communicating every few seconds on your phone. and equally the ability to watch films anywhere, anytime, or engage in other sort of social media or media activities, so that we have a sort of entertainment system at our fingertips, available 24/7, which is a real worry. And I therefore think, actually, even more than ever, we need more physical activity, simply, A, to make us physically active, but also, B, to kind of help de-stress and taking a walk with your partner, your kids, or a dog if you have one, gives you 30 minutes away from technology, just to sort of, in a sense, clear your brain, but also, you're getting mental benefits, but also physical benefits at the same time. And those things really are important for your equilibrium and help, obviously stop you putting on weight as well. So physical activity is a great way to try and keep your weight stable and stop putting on weight. It's not a fantastic way to lose weight, because that's predominantly dietary driven, but it helps a lot of people stop putting on weight. So in the same way, I think we've got too many calories in our society, and we're fighting that battle. We also have too much, as you say, IT in our society. And therefore, people have to try even harder now to be both physically fit and relatively lean. It's becoming more and more difficult. So fundamentally, I do think people are lazier than they were 30 years ago. It's just the environment has changed in such a way that it makes it much easier or much harder to be physically active and eat the right amount. So that's what we're battling against.
We're entertaining ourselves to death in a way. I know that a lot of people talk about the young people and getting to them early and getting these ideas about exercise and physical capability. I remember growing up, and our President Kennedy at the time with his youth council and physical fitness, and that was a big drive at that point. But I'm noticing that in England today, you are targeting middle-aged people with this new campaign. Tell us what we need to do and how different the messaging needs to be to young people versus those in the middle years.
No, that's a good question. I think what tends to happen is the data show, if you look at the totality of data, people, particularly boys, stay reasonably active up to about 13, 14, 15, and often carry it on longer, because here in the UK, soccer is played pretty much everywhere. And boys will carry on playing soccer in their late teens and early 20s when they go to university. Many girls in many parts of society, however, tend to fall off activity by 13, 14, 15. So they stop playing hockey much more quickly, and that is a problem. And the other problem is when people start university or college, because often they're away from home, their eating habits change and their levels of alcohol intake often increase, and invariably people put on a bit of weight. The big problem, and then also the same thing kind of happens, as we all know, is when you get married, as your partner, people also tend to put on weight then, and as I did as well. And I think I had to make a conscious effort when I was realizing I was putting on a few pounds to change my diet fundamentally. And I was in the fortuitous position as being a medical doctor to know what I should be eating and how to go about it, and also increase my physical activity. And I think the message, really, people listening, is if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So in a sense, for physical activity, finding things that you enjoy, that you love, in addition to commuting to work, if you can, is what people are going to stick at. And so the message for middle and for young people is get them to, for example, experience a range of physical activity in sports, and find the 2 or 3 things that they enjoy, because those are the things that you're likely to sustain. So for me, I love my bike. I also play soccer once or twice, usually not twice a week anymore, but once a week. Other people will enjoy swimming or running or tennis. In the US, it could be just playing basketball with your friends. But finding activity, 1 or 2 activities that you really enjoy, is what you're likely to sustain. And trying to engage those activities, making time for them during your midlife, is really important. A, it's social. You get to meet your friends. B, you're getting physical activity to help you stop putting on weight. 3, you're de-stressing yourself, as it were. Helps mental function. And actually, those are the really important messages. And there's another message. If by the time you get to 45, 50, 60 and you stop being physically active, you will more quickly lose your muscle mass, i.e. your engine. Your engine will start to shrink quickly. And it's really therefore important as you approach your 40s and 50s, start being physically active. And actually to stay the same weight, we have to increase activity a bit more because our basal metabolism tends to decrease. So those brisk walks, commuting to work, playing the occasional game of soccer or basketball or swimming or cycling or walking or taking your dog out in a habitual way can be enjoyable and gives you huge health benefits. So those are the messages we have to get across. And I think the final thing I would say is that we can, social media has kind of got us there, but I think we need to have clever ways where we can actually try and use it to get people together to do activities together, because the activities that we tend to also enjoy are the ones we do with our friends. And maybe, social media can be used to help, group walks, for example. But I think that's, something that people are testing at the moment, but we haven't got a really good answer for these things actually at the moment.
It might be good if you tell us what benefits us in terms of our heart rate when we're talking about a brisk walk. I recall a gentleman, I was involved in public television here in America, and we did a series years ago called America's Walking, and people couldn't believe that we would do a series about walking, but we used that as a metaphor for activity and enjoying and exploring the outdoor world and the like. But I remember him saying that you're involved in a brisk walk if you're doing what we yell at kids about when they're at the side of the pool and they're running too much close to the pool and you tell them to slow down,
sure.
You know that's a brisk walk. What is a brisk walk that really benefits our heart rates?
So a brisk walk is when you're walking sufficient speed just to feel slightly out of breath. So, a gentle walk, you can engage in an easy conversation with your friend or your partner, but a brisk walk is when you're slightly out of breath. You can still engage in a conversation, but you feel as if you're breathing a bit faster than normal. And by that process, that means you're pushing your cardiorespiratory system a little bit extra beyond the normal kind of gradual walk. And the benefits, as you see, are huge. As a simple example, if you have a nice, lunch with quite a lot of, say, sugar and fat, if you go for a brisk walk soon after, we know, for example, your sugar levels don't go up anywhere near as high as if you didn't. Same for fat levels. If you have a fatty meal, but if you engaged in a long, say, a decent brisk walk, 2 or 3 hours before, or even the evening before, you will clear that fat from your blood much quicker. And as we all know, a really other good barometer in people who are otherwise healthy, not on tablets, of your cardiorespiratory, your cardiovascular system is your heart rate. People who tend to be fit and active tend to have slightly lower heart rates, assuming that none of them are on medications, than people who are not as fit. So your heart rate is a good barometer of the capacity of your heart and your lungs to move that blood around your system in an efficient way. So those are the kind of things. And I think also in a brisk walk, your heart rate will go up just in the sense that you're moving, you're having a dynamic push of all your blood systems, your metabolism is being engaged, so that there's multiple benefits going on in a variety of body tissues, as it were.
We're very concerned in the U.S. about the cost of prescription drugs and health care overall. And I notice that Public Health in England is very involved in this campaign to get middle-aged people walking and more active again. How much more does Britain care about this than the United States? Because you're collectively involved in the payment of all of the health-related, illnesses that come because of not having an active lifestyle and poor eating habits.
No, you're right. So I think Public Health England clearly is funded by the government. The government also funds the National Health Service. So it recognizes that to try and avoid people developing more obesity and therefore more diabetes and also more cardiovascular disease at young ages, we need to get the nation fitter and more active. And therefore it helps resource Public Health England to push these initiatives. Now, the reality is whether they make a meaningful difference is a different question, and I think that needs to be evaluated. And, the other factor is maybe the big changes in societal food culture and in IT are so strong and dominant that anything we try is really going to be like, appear into insignificance compared to the big adverse things that are happening in society that we have to push against, if I was to put it that way. And as you know, in the UK, our obesity levels are one of the highest in Europe. We're starting to approach, levels in some parts of the UK to the levels that you have in the US. So it's a huge concern for us. And whether we can really get those messages across to society in the way that really helps people make differences is a big, big question. It's not enough just to say to people what they must do. We have to find other clever ways to encourage them to do it. Now, whether that's carrot or stick, I don't know. It's probably more carrot rather than stick. But even how we do that, you can't physically force somebody to get off their backside and walk to work, for example. So I don't know how we do that. The messaging is, should be made simpler. But how we actually make this happen, I don't know. Maybe, there are other things going on in terms of improving cycle lanes, for example, in the UK. There's a huge push now to do that in several cities. And those kind of combinations will make a difference. UK, unlike the US, we have much smaller distances to commute to get to places. So the reality of walking places and cycling to work can be done. And there's a lot more cycles available in many, many cities that people can easily pick up and rent. A very cheap cost to keep, go from A to B. And those kind of initiatives, I think, will make a difference over time. But overall, I think there are small changes. We need to speed it up. But at least we're going in the right way, I think. But it's going to take a long time.
We'll return to this episode of America Trends in just a moment. If you like what we're doing here at America Trends Podcast, please don't keep it to yourself. I know there are a lot of people, John, who think, well, if I'm listening and somebody else wants to listen at the same time, maybe we're going to collide and they're not going to be able to hear us. Yeah. Is that the way the technology works?
No, there's plenty of bandwidth. Everybody can listen at the same time.
All right. Well, that dispels that myth. Now, you can do a number of things that would really be helpful to us. You could give us a kind rating or a review at Apple Podcasts, and that boosts what they consider to be our value and visibility. And what does that do, John?
Well, that puts us in the forefront so that you can find us easier, and most important is other people can find us easier.
And you can subscribe there or on our site, americatrendspodcast.com, or wherever you're listening, so we can alert you to new episodes of the podcast, which, by the way, we put out twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And stay in touch with us on both Facebook and Twitter at Trends Podcast. Or you can like us on Facebook or follow us where, John?
On Twitter.
On Twitter, that's right, where the world turns to hear fake news or whatever it is. Well, you can direct message us at Trends Podcast or using hashtag Trends Podcast. And John, with our growing audience, and really it's been pretty remarkable, a lot of people just came to us the last month or two, and they might have missed earlier episodes. Can they get them again?
They can look through them and pick the ones they want to listen to. They're all on the website, and a lot of them are up on iTunes, many of them.
All right. Well, listen, there's lots of material to listen to. We hope you have the time, and we'll lend it to us because we try to make it worth your while. And thanks so much for listening.
And tell your friends.
We now return to this episode of America Trends.
Are you worried about this being a multi-generational problem? And so we really have young people getting off to really bad starts, really focused on the technology and entertaining themselves without thinking they have to exert. Then the middle-aged and what they're going through. And then, of course, those who are older who have all of the effects of this ill eating and lack of exercise. So it's multi-generational. Are you worried about that?
Yes, I am. There's a kind of different messages. On the one hand, life expectancy has been going up for the last, 10 decades. It's been going up, as you know. Although, as we also know, that it's starting now to plateau, which may well be because of the obesity epidemic is now starting to hit 10 to 20 to 30 years later in terms of premature mortality. And as more and more time goes on, we may even see a reversal of life expectancy. So yes, I am worried. And I'm not worried for the whole of society, but I think there's particular pockets of extreme early onset obesity, sedentary activity, adverse eating, which is leading to premature diabetes, hypertension, and as you say, cardiovascular disease. So those are the things that I'm worried about, and we do really need to make inroads. And you know, seeing someone who's 35 develop type 2 diabetes is frankly a disaster. It's a disaster for that individual. It's a disaster, you know, for them and for their families and you know, for society in general.
I know one of the giants in the room that we really haven't addressed is the processed food industry. And I know a lot of people think about the drug industry at times and the opioid epidemic. We think about cigarettes and the lung cancer and many other illnesses. But what about processed food? And is England willing to do more than the United States, whether it's advertising curtailment, whether it's really looking at the calories and the sugar? Is England willing to do anything? I don't think in America we've done enough.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point as well. So the answer is, so I now live in Scotland, which has got a devolved nation, and in Scotland we have now, the government has just put out an obesity consultation which involves stronger consideration of some of those factors that you put in. For example, to substantially curtail advertisements to for children, to more clearly label foods with high calorific content. There's a proposal in the UK, as you know, for a taxation on sugar-rich beverages. There's a proposal to put calorie contents, on foods and restaurants so that people are aware of what they're putting in their mouths. So I think we are perhaps more empowered to be able to make some of those changes. Now, this is only at consultation stage. Scotland, as a nation, does have even more obesity than the rest of the UK, so that's a big concern for us. And I think the government in Scotland recognises it really has to tackle the processed food industry, because voluntary changes by food industry is not going to happen. It has to be somehow legislated in a way that forces the food industry to make better quality foods which are less calorific and healthier, shall we say, and also have less adverse high calorific foods at the same time. It's a tough ask. Part of the problem, both in the US and the UK, is a big part of our economy, as we all know, is now the food industry, and thus anything that impinges upon their profits can lead to substantial lobbying behind the scenes. But the reality is the food industry should recognize that actually people are still willing to pay the same prices, but the food industry can provide better quality foods, and we'll just have to pay the same prices. But then that becomes a win-win in the sense that, people eat less calories, are healthier. They might still pay the same amount of food for the foods that they eat, but that then it translates into health benefits, and that therefore also means the food industry is helping society rather than just merely interested in their profits, which is really something that has been going on for the last 25 years, and we have to reverse that somehow. It's a tough ask, and you ask really important questions. I don't think any of us have got perfect answers.
In closing, Dr. Sattar, how worried are you? Because you're a doctor and people come into your office and you give them advice. There are many physicians who are not trained in nutritional science or even in a position to tell somebody to go out and exercise because maybe they're overweight themselves. But I mean, in terms of how much we are self-inflicting these things as a society or industrialized nations, what would you say? I mean, because I know that doctors are oftentimes reluctant, really, to spoon out the difficult medicine that's required because it's in our hands, but we're not necessarily told that we've got to take these changes seriously.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. I would tell you that actually we've been doing it wrong. I think the days of physicians simply saying to their patients, you must do X and Y, have gone. The reality is, for individuals to fully understand what they need to do, first of all, we have to tell them, here is the roadmap to improved health. So, for example, somebody comes to my clinic, they're clearly overweight, they have a problem linked to their obesity, for example, fatty liver disease, or their sugar levels are suggesting that they're at high risk for diabetes. My job now is to tell them, look, clearly, if you were to lose a few pounds, you will substantially reduce your risks for developing diabetes, or your fatty liver will resolve. And the way to do this is the following. So I can give them simple goals, but what's happening in the United Kingdom is we're going even better than that. We're actually referring them to commercial weight loss providers for free. And that has become a policy in a number of cities in the UK, and it has been shown in randomized clinical trials that commercial health providers, people who go to them, will do twice as well as they would from a dietitian within the NHS. Or else, even if I don't send someone to those, I give simple advice. I give simple 2 or 3 goals to my patients that I think is achievable and sustainable. And then if they make those changes, even if they don't lose weight, but if they stop putting on weight, that's a success. And then if they come back, I give them another 2 goals. And the goals would be, for example, cut out sugar-sweetened beverages and replace by diet drinks or water would be number 1, for example. Or else, cut out taking lots of white bread, replaced by brown bread, or have a high-fiber cereal instead of the other cereals or other types of breakfast you have. So I give them a range of potential options, and they can pick what they would like to do first and foremost, and then they can try and embed it and sustain it. And of course, the big option would be to reduce the snacking of high-dense calories and replace them with a bit more fruit and a bit more vegetables, during their lunch or whatever. And again, we have to tell them exactly what they should be doing rather than just telling them you must lose weight or you must become physically active. And we must also be empathetic with our patients. We should not be talking down to our patients. It's a team effort. So my job as a physician, I think, would be to help educate a lot of my colleagues around the world and say this is how we should be doing it. And we as a community should start to speak with one voice with the consistent messages that have been proven to work. And I think that's the job that we have to do over the next 5 to 10 years to help our patients and to help ourselves as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sattar. Talking about the laziness epidemic on AmericaTrendsPodcast.com.